Unique people leading unique lives shape and inform Iowa City. This community is enhanced by these women and men who live in our midst, working, teaching, creating. Welcome to a series of conversations with people who have stories to tell. Join my special guests and me, Ellen Buchanan, in a series of interviews called One of a Kind. For 14 years, Sally Mathis served as Director of Nursing of University Hospitals and Clinics. She retired this past summer. In addition, for the past 5 years, she was the Associate Director of University Hospital. As a fair, firm, and innovative leader, Sally saw her department double in size to well over 1,500 nurses and staff. In this challenging job, she initiated many positive changes and new programs. She encouraged nurses to get degrees under a tuition reimbursement program. Each year, 3 nurses pursuing graduate degrees are awarded fellowships in her honor. So far, 12 people have received the Sally A. Mathis Scholarship. In 1993, the Iowa Organization of Nurse Executives gave Sally special recognition for being an outstanding leader and mentor for the state of Iowa. She's currently serving as chair of the search committee for a new director of university hospitals. Besides her commitment to the university, Sally Mathis is committed to this community. She serves on numerous boards like OKNO, University Athletic Club, the Iowa State Board of Examiners, Visiting Nurse Association, and others. And Sally has been one of the coordinators of Project Green's annual Green Garden Fair. A crucial part of her story is that of a wife, a mother, and grandmother. She has 5 children and 5 grandchildren. Thanks, Sally, for being my guest on One of a Kind. I know your story begins in 1934 when you were born in October. Were you born in Dayton or were you born in Des Moines?
I was actually born in a hospital in Des Moines, but my home was the small town of Dayton, Iowa.
Mm-hmm. And did you grow up in the town or did you grow up on a farm?
I grew up on a farm just outside of Dayton and went to the schools there and participated in life in small town Iowa.
How big is Dayton?
I think about 1,000 people.
Mm-hmm. And so your father was a farmer all his life, or what about?
Well, my parents were both educated at Drake University and both taught school. And then at the time that his father retired, my dad bought the farm, which is a century farm, and my mom and dad farmed then during my growing up years.
What do you think growing up on a farm taught you about yourself?
I think it taught me that there's a continuity to things. The crops go in the spring and they're harvested in the fall, that you must be attentive to the needs of the animals. They must be fed daily. We each had chores to do, and the livestock needed the attention once or twice or 3 times a day, and those kinds of things have served me well in terms of being responsible and paying attention to needs of others.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know you have 3 sisters, and you're the oldest. What challenge did that present either to your sisters or to yourself of being the oldest one in your family?
It probably presented more challenge to my sisters trying to keep up with me. I know I was extremely bossy. I organized them when I was young, and they were younger than me. We were close in age. There were 4 of us in 4 years. Mm-hmm. So we had wonderful times playing together. Being on the farm, we played with each other and did a lot of make-believe kind of playing. It was fun being the oldest, sometimes a responsibility because I went first in life experiences, but we were very close and have remained very close as we've grown older.
Now, is it 2 of your sisters are teachers also?
Yes.
So they followed in your parents' footsteps,
Yes.
but you decided that nursing was more attractive. Was there a special reason, or I know when we were growing up, nursing and teaching were the kind of the vocations available for women.
In my community, women often were teachers or sometimes secretaries, but a friend a year older than myself decided to go into nursing. And when she would come home on weekends and tell me about the things she was learning and about taking care of patients, I thought this was just the most glorious, glamorous thing in the whole world. And I decided this is something that I just had to do with my life. And it's a decision I've never regretted.
Now, where did you train?
Iowa Methodist School of Nursing in Des Moines, and that's associated with Drake University.
Is that, how many years is that?
It's a 3-year program, so when I graduated, I had what's called a diploma, and in nursing, that allowed me to write the state board examination and be certified as a registered nurse.
So I know you lived various places. You lived in Illinois, and you came to Iowa City in the 60s, and you went to work at a care center, is that right?
Yes, when my children were small, I usually took some time off and really was mother. And then would go back to work again, and sort of to keep my finger in the pie and my skills up to date, I worked in long-term care for a while.
That was quite an experience, I'm sure. And then you moved from there to the VA.
I worked to the VA hospital, where I worked for about 3 years, and then I joined the university community.
What drew you, Sally? Because you said when you were little that nursing was glamorous to you and exciting. This friend of yours told you about it, but you were drawn to administration. Is it because you liked, when you were little, liked to be bossy? Now, I mean, administration is more than being a boss. Now, what drew you to what attracted you to administration?
I'm not sure that something actually attracted me, but I like to organize things, and that included patient care, and I think I had some gifts for doing it reasonably well. So I often would be the charge nurse, and I was a head nurse. So I think it was something that I have aptitude for, and I sort of decided that's what I ought to develop. My most favorite thing, though, was just being a nurse.
Well, now, when you took over the director's job, there was a high vacancy rate, I read about 10%.
Yes.
And you turned that around to?
Well, we don't have any vacancy rate now. The positions are filled, but that's certainly not all to my credit. Some of it are just the forces around the country that took place during the 80s and early 90s. Some of it is that I had some wonderful people supporting me and functioning in the role of head nurse and clinical directors within the department, and good people in our human resources department. Some of it is the lure of the Iowa City community and the work of nurses around the state of Iowa to bring nursing more into focus for young people seeking a career.
What do you tell young men and women who come to you and say, I want to be a nurse? Do you warn them about some of the downside of it, or what do you tell them?
I think I probably glow when I talk about nursing because it's been so fulfilling for me, but I am realistic because it's a very responsible type of work. Sometimes it's very hard physically and emotionally and mentally, and it would not be fair to withhold that kind of information. For good nurses, it's also academically difficult. You have to work hard to attain and maintain your skills. But there's so much reward in working with people at their most vulnerable, people who are very frightened and who need someone to assist them along the way. And then it's working with the whole healthcare team. It's really an exciting place to be.
Getting back to the administration part of your story, I hear the turnover rate for directors of nursing is quite high, and you were there 14 years. How did that happen? I mean, what was the glue that kept you here?
Well, part of it was the Iowa City community. Part of it was the administration at university hospitals, which made it worthwhile staying here. And I think part of it was the people that I had surrounded myself with in my own nursing administration. Just wonderful people that made the work inspiring and challenging and fulfilling.
What do you look back on those 14 years? What were your biggest challenges as the director of nursing?
Well, of course, maybe the first one was making certain we had enough nurses. As perhaps you know, University Hospitals has been recognized several times now by U.S. News and World Report as one of the top hospitals in the country. And that comes for a number of reasons, one of which is having properly prepared nurses and enough of them. So making certain we had enough nurses was a big challenge. And then making certain that they were prepared adequately, that they had good training and good academic credentials. So being able to educate nurses and put a tuition reimbursement program in place were things that needed doing, and I think have been very worthwhile.
Tell me about the tuition reimbursement program.
Well, it's a program where we would help pay someone's tuition to attain a baccalaureate or a master's degree. Usually nurses would continue to work for us and go to school part-time, and it's been a very successful program.
And the scholarship in your name is lovely, and that goes to graduate students in nursing?
Yes, that's just a wonderful honor, and I received that when I'd been in my position 10 years. My staff had a celebration. It's kind of fun to celebrate when you're staying rather than when you're leaving.
Right.
And Mr. Colleton named from the hospitals the Sally Mathis Scholarship Fund, and each year there's a committee of people who select from the candidates 3 who will be working on a master's degree in administration, and they have been leadership people on our staff.
And you've had how many now?
There are
Is
12
it 12?
of them.
12, that's
Yes.
right, I said that, 12. What do you think are your greatest strengths, have been your greatest strengths as a director? I know it's hard to talk about strengths, but you obviously know yourself pretty well.
I suspect it might be my ability to negotiate. I think I'm a pretty good listener. I value people and what they have to say, and I try to listen carefully and then make a decision that's going to be in the best interest of the person and of the organization.
Has nursing attracted men, and as many men as physicians have attracted, people who are starting to get their MD? Women are now in the field in great numbers?
No, it really hasn't. It's still seen as predominantly a woman's profession. In the country, there are about 5% of the nurses that are men. Here, it's probably maybe 8%. So we're doing a little better at Iowa, but it's still predominantly women.
What about age? Do you have all ages at University Hospital?
We have all ages. In my day, when I was a student, one would go right from high school to college and they would enter their profession. So entering nurses were 21, 22, maybe 23. Nowadays, the majority might be in their 30s, actually. So what we're seeing is women who are educating when they're older or doing second career options.
And aren't hospitals being quite accommodating to schedules that some people can work like 3 days in a row and be off 4, or work weekends? And
yes, we really needed to do that so that there would be some attention to one's personal life. We are seeing things like job sharing. One of the joys of nursing is that you can work days or evenings or nights. Maybe people would all like to work days, but unfortunately patients don't choose when to be sick. And in a hospital you have to cover 7 days, all 3 shifts. So we have to divide the work up, but we've really tried to be sensitive to personal needs.
well, you've been in the nursing profession for well nigh 30-some years, 37 maybe. What have, to you, the biggest changes that you've seen since you began way back there at Drake?
I think maybe the biggest change is the expectation for the role of a nurse. When I was a very young nurse, we had to learn the sciences so that we understood not only what to do, but why we were doing it. But we didn't have the in-depth knowledge that our nurses need today. Care is much more sophisticated. Patients who are admitted and stay in a hospital are much sicker than they used to be because of the multiple payment systems. And so if a nurse is a hospital nurse, or if they're going out to do home care, or they're working in long-term care, they have to have a good understanding of all aspects of care, and I think that's probably the biggest change.
Well, I know you've influenced a lot of young women and men. Who's had some major influences in your life?
I suspect my first influences came from my parents. My dad was a math science type person with a very good mind, and it was more analytical. My mother was more of a creative person. She was good at artistic type things and at writing. She helped me with speech making when I was very young and running for an office, perhaps in high school. So I'd say they were my first big influences. My maternal grandmother was a very, very special person to me. And
what was she like?
She came from Norway. In my growing up years, she was in her 80s and her 90s. And my bachelor uncle lived with her, and then he went off to the war. And since I was the oldest grandchild, I was the designated person that would go stay with Grandma at night.
How far away did she live from you?
She just lived in my little town, and I would ride my bicycle home sometimes during the day, and I would stay with her. And she influenced me in ways that I didn't realize until I was grown. But a marvelous, marvelous woman.
Well, was she born in Norway, or did
she was born in Norway?
Do you know where? About
Bergen. And came to this country, raised her 8 children here during very difficult times. Her husband died relatively young, and so Grandma was a widow for some over 30 years.
Kept the family together.
Kept the family together. And I can remember as a youngster sitting with her in her home listening to the radio, because it was before television, and we might listen to the New York Philharmonic, and those were such different sounds from what we might hear in our junior high band. But it was my beginning appreciation for other types of music. We would read together, and she would have me read to her.
How did she learn English?
I don't know how she learned English.
Did she go to school? Do you know if she,
I think she had done her schooling. I think she came to this country when she was about 18. So, and she did not have formal education. She had a brogue, a very Scandinavian brogue, and occasionally she would lapse off. I grew up in a Scandinavian community. About half of the community was Swedish, and my father was Swedish, and the other half were Norwegian, and my mother was Norwegian. So she would sort of speak a mix of the languages.
It seems to be a pattern. Those Norwegian women married those Swedish men.
Yes.
So, besides your grandmother, whom else did?
I had some school teachers that were very influential in my life. Because I was in a small town and I lived in the same community, I remember probably where each of my classes took place. But in high school, 2 particular people, one was a man who taught me sciences and biology, Belford Walker, and the other was a history teacher and my women's coach, Rosemary Hall. And they were both people that were very secure in their teaching abilities and transmitted that to their students, made them want to learn.
Sally, I know a very big part of your story are your children and your 5 grandchildren. Tell me where they are and what they're about.
There are 5 children, as you mentioned. My 2 boys are the 2 single ones, Jeff and Gabe, and they're both here in Iowa City, and work at the hospital. Gabe works part-time, and he's a senior at the university. And Mark, 3, is married to Liz, and they are in Waterloo. Both of them are part of KWWL, the NBC affiliate, and their child is Mark C. Mathis IV, and he is 7 years old. Randall Ann is married to Bill, and they're both with radio in Hibbing, Minnesota, and their little one is 2, and his name is Ryan Mathis Klaproth. And then daughter Joy is married to John Johnson, and they live in Mason City. John is in the insurance business, and Joy's a nurse. And they have 3 little girls, Allie, Taylor, and new little baby, Madeline.
My goodness, your cup runneth over. Tell me how you met. I think it's I do know the story, but maybe many of our viewers don't know how you met Mark.
Mark and I had lived in the same community. In fact, our children had been good friends. And it was really our girls, Randall and Joy, and probably Randall, who said to her dad about a year after her mother's death, why don't you take out Sally? She'd spent a lot of time in high school at my home. And so it was kind of with their blessing that we began to date, and it was one of life's miracles.
And that was back, as I remember,
1979.
1979.
And Mark had surgery, heart surgery that year, so we really felt like we were turning over a new leaf and that every day was a special blessing.
What were some of the best things that you and Mark did as parents and step-parents when you were combining those 2 families, which isn't real easy?
we tried to do things together, but not force the issue. Mm-hmm. And because some of the children were still around Iowa City or at home, that was easier to do. And they seemed to enjoy being with each other and being in our home. We took some trips together, a one-day ski trip or just going places for the holidays. We were particularly big on having some time together at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, and then something like Memorial Day, where we would just do fun games where the little children could participate, and they could come and be there for as long as it worked in their schedules.
Hmm. How was it, though, with the two of you both working at university hospitals with such incredibly busy schedules?
Oh, it worked out very well. We kind of made a pact that we wouldn't talk about work things into the night, because that would not be healthy for either one of us. We were very supportive and understanding, and I got certain kinds of attention. If there was a problem and I called down to his department, they might just say, well, we better get this fixed quickly. So it really worked very well.
A few bennies then.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Sally, with your busy schedule and being a mother and now a grandmother, how did you have time to do your community involvement?
I think you make time for things that are important, and I've received a lot from this community, and I've always felt that, particularly if you're in a position of leadership, that you need to give something back. So I've tried to be on 2 or 3 boards. It means saying no to some things and making priorities. But if I have a skill that's needed and somebody can use my services, I've always felt that I needed to do that. And often the meetings would be early morning. My OKNO board meets at 7 a.m. And sometimes late at night. So it works out. You can do it if you decide that's what's important.
Mm-hmm. Now, you retired this summer, but you're really not retired. Soon after you had your going away party or celebration in honoring you, you were called back into service.
Hunter Rawlings called and asked if I would chair this very important committee and convinced me that I ought to do so. And we're underway with our work now, and hopefully we'll have some candidates on campus by spring or late winter for interviews so we can make a choice. This is an extremely important position, and we're eager to get this taken care of.
And aren't you consulting too?
Well, a little bit. You can only do that as long as you're active and know what's going on in nursing, and so I'm doing a little bit of that kind of thing, but mostly I'm just sort of helping out on projects at the hospital.
Well, now you will have a bit more free time. What are you looking for? Tell me what you want to do. What are some of your fantasies this next decade?
Well, I want to do some traveling. In the early 80s, I went as a work project to the Orient, to China, and did some consulting there. But I've not traveled very much, and so while I have my health and my enthusiasm and the desire to do so, I'd like to do some traveling. I want to spend some more time with the grandchildren when moms and dads can go away and take a weekend or a few days. I love to read.
Okay, tell me, what are you reading?
Well, I usually have at least 3 things by my bed. Something that's absolute nonsense that I won't remember the next day.
I call it a beach book or an airplane book or...
Absolutely. Then I might have a good novel. I usually have a journal of some sort, a nursing or management type journal. I usually have a biography or an autobiography that I'm working on. So it kind of depends on whether it's a rainy afternoon and I want to spend a bit of time reading or whether I have 15 minutes before I fall asleep. But I just am very fulfilled by reading about the lives of other people.
Biography. When you were in China, what kind of a role were you consulting for? What? I mean, I know in the nursing field, but in what area?
Yes, the People's Republic of China had made a request to the China Medical Board for 2 educators and 2 administrators to come as a team of 4 and look at their education and their hospitals. They had upgraded their medical practice and education, but they hadn't done anything with nursing. So we spent about a month doing that. And that was a long time away from my family, but it was a very fulfilling, rewarding type of experience. Being in a different culture made me appreciate more what we have here. They were probably 20 years behind us technically in China, but very appreciative of our visit.
Well, I hope you can go back again.
It would be fun.
Thank you, Sally. I've loved chatting with you, and I know my viewers will enjoy listening to you. Thank you. My guest on One of a Kind has been Sally Mathis, former Director of Nursing and Associate Director of University Hospitals. Her nursing career has encompassed care centers, the VA, Oakdale Sanitarium, University Hospitals, administration, the Iowa State Board of Examiners for Nursing. Her hallmarks as an administrator are integrity, consensus building, fairness, and innovation. One of her greatest strengths is that of a negotiator. A native Iowan, Sally has been a part of the Iowa City community for 28 years. Besides her professional commitments, she's been involved in many community activities. The last 2 years, she's been one of the chairwomen of the annual Project Green Garden Sale. She sits on boards and is currently chairing the search committee for a replacement for the director of University Hospitals. Sally and her husband Mark combine 2 families, and there are 5 children and 5 grandchildren. In her compassionate, determined, and dedicated way, Sally Mathis has made a difference. She is one of a kind.